Harmlessness lies with our intentions. May beings all live happily and safely, and may their hearts rejoice within themselves. If we remember to think in this way, there will be peace and security within ourselves and within those we meet. The next line says, "Let no one bring about another's ruin and not despise in any way or place. Let no one do anything to hurt another being." Even if an action is despicable, that doesn't mean we despise the person. The action may not have been wholesome, but there is the person's ignorance to be taken into account. If we despise the person, we make bad karma. It's enough that the other person is already doing that.
Just as a mother at the risk of life loves and protects her child, her only child, so one should cultivate this boundless love to all that live in the whole universe. If we could imagine being everybody's mother, and we may very well have been in past lives, then we might get the right slant on how to approach other people, everybody, bar none. These are the Buddha's injunctions, and he mentioned them as a direction, as a guideline. Once he also mentioned that if we were to lay the bones of all the fathers and mothers we have had in our lives end to end, they would circle this globe innumerable times. If we've had that many fathers and mothers, we must have had that many children also. If we can think in terms of universality rather than of one's own 2 children at home, then we can expand to the extent where our lovingness reaches out to many. If the whole of humanity are our children, surely we are not going to expect them to all conform to our ideas of what they're going to be and how they're going to behave. They're not all mine. When we think of it in those terms, a bit of the clinging we have for what we consider ours may be diminished. A mother risks her own life to protect her children, the Buddha said. This is the way we need to feel about everybody.
That sounds impossible to fulfill, but it really is a guideline to show us what is lacking in our love for others. This becomes very evident when we compare our feelings for our own children with the feelings we have for the neighbor's children down the street. What to say about all beings in the whole universe? It's not impossible to imagine that one could develop concern, solicitude, lovingness, care for all beings, especially if one can see their suffering situation.
The Buddha would sit every morning in meditation, and it is said that he then cast his net of compassion. With his divine eye, clairvoyance, he would catch someone in it who could benefit from his teaching. He would then go to that person and teach them Dhamma. He did this for 45 years, walking long distances to reach people. Such compassion is the compassion of an enlightened one. We can develop this feeling of motherliness toward others when we see their difficulties, just as the Buddha saw them when he threw out his net of compassion.
Extending from a consciousness sublime, upward and downward and across the world, lovingness to all beings extends from a sublime consciousness, from a consciousness that is not imbued with human problems. It's a consciousness elevated through meditation, which brings about a change of awareness. The ordinary consciousness always has some problem that it's chewing on, like a rat gnawing on wood. When it becomes imbued with loving kindness and compassion, it has these 2 states as its focus and lets go of mundane considerations. This kind of consciousness is untroubled.
Untroubled, free from hate and enmity. That doesn't mean that the mundane problems have disappeared. They never disappear. If you think back for a moment, can you remember any day in the last 20 years when there wasn't something that needed attending to? An untroubled mind can be free of hate and enmity because an untroubled mind is a happy mind, and a happy mind doesn't hate. And while one stands and while one walks and sits or one lies down still free from drowsiness, one should be intent on this mindfulness. This is divine abiding here, they say.
Whatever position one's in, standing, sitting, walking, or lying down, not falling asleep yet, one cultivates loving kindness. Mindful of lovingness like a mother toward all beings. It's limiting for heart and mind to only love 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 persons, when there are 4 billion people to be loved. When one is a mother or a father, we should not find it too difficult to gauge our feelings toward others because we know what we feel toward our own children. We can also remember how our own mother acted. With these personal experiences as a foundation, we can try to extend our love further.
This is divine abiding here, they say, divine life right here on earth. This creates a feeling of total contentment, security, and peace, and all other wholesome states accompany it. It creates a mind that is quickly concentrated, which is one of the 11 benefits of loving kindness. It's a divine way of living now. We don't have to wait until we reach the Deva realms. But when one lives quite free from any view, is virtuous, with perfect insight one, and greed for sensual desires expelled, one surely comes no more to any womb.
This is a description of an arahant. But when one lives quite free from any view, the only right views are the Four Noble Truths, which include enlightenment. Viewpoints are always viewpoints, not based on valid experiences. Nazaruddin, a great Sufi sage, once said, "Don't try to become enlightened. Just discard all your views and opinions." Getting rid of views doesn't mean that we lose our discrimination of what's wholesome and unwholesome in our own actions. But the many viewpoints that people carry around with them keep them in the prison of their own mind states. How they and others should speak, act, and look, what the self and the world are, is virtuous, with perfect insight one. Perfect insight is attained with the perfection of virtue as a foundation.
And greed for sensual desires expelled, all sensual desires having been eliminated, with nothing desired or desirable there is no suffering. This is the doorway to Nibbana, the wishless liberation. One surely comes no more to any womb. No rebirth. This discourse goes from the mundane states of being able and upright, straight and not proud, to enlightenment in the brevity of a few verses. We first develop the heart with loving kindness to the point of loving all beings as if we were their mother, enabling us to meditate because loving kindness is one of the 3 pillars of meditation. Because of using this mindfulness at all times, which means being in the here and now, we lose our viewpoints about self, others, the world. Established in virtue, one gains insight and enlightenment follows. A straightforward pathway, no deviations, argumentations, just the doing of it.
This is the essence of this well-known discourse, renowned by word but not so well known by deed. The Buddha gave exact guidelines as to how to purify the heart, how to arrange our life outwardly and inwardly. It's all there for the taking, but nobody can do it for anyone else. You have to do it for yourself. Once there was a man who came to see the Buddha and said he would like to ask him a question. He said that he had been listening to the Buddha's discourses for a number of years, and during that time had met many monks and nuns who were disciples of the Buddha. He had come to know quite a few more intimately and had found that some of them had changed greatly. They had become loving and kind, wise and patient, but others hadn't changed at all. There were even some who had become far more impatient than they used to be, less loving, and some were most unkind. Yet he had met all these monks and nuns listening to the same discourses. He wanted to know why such a thing was possible.
The Buddha said to him, "What's your hometown?" And the man said, "I'm from Rajagaha." The Buddha said, "Do you sometimes go back to Rajagaha?" The man replied, "I often go. I have business and family there." The Buddha then inquired, "Do you know the way to Rajagaha?" The man said, "I know it so well, I can go in the dark. I don't even need to see it, I know it that well." The Buddha queried, "And if somebody wanted to know how to get to Rajagaha, could you explain it to them?" The man said, "If you know anybody who wants to go there, you should send them to me, because I can really give exact explanations of how to get there. I've gone the way that many times." The Buddha said, "I believe you. But if you were to explain to someone how to get to Rajagaha and then that person were to stay right here in Benares, would it be your fault?" The man said, "Of course not. I'm only the one who shows the way." The Buddha replied, "So am I. I too am only the one who shows the way."
All you have heard, written down, or know already, are only landmarks, signposts pointing in the right direction. But unless we start moving along that route, we'll remain armchair travelers. The discourse on loving kindness needs to be made real. There are no superfluous words in it, each is meaningful and directive. The Buddha also said, if it wasn't possible, O monks, to do only good, would not ask you to do so. It is possible, he said, it is possible to cultivate a mother's love for all beings in one's heart. It is also possible to become enlightened, otherwise he wouldn't have urged all his disciples to do so. It is surely possible to have only thoughts of harmlessness and compassion. Thoughts are of primary importance. What kind of thoughts to think is revealed in this discourse. Thinking determines whether we create inner turmoil, heaviness, disruption, or peace and happiness.
The discourse starts out with what one should do to gain the state of peacefulness. It isn't something we are doing for others. We are doing it for ourselves, and that's the only real motivation. Rightly so, because we are the only ones who can eventually change ourselves. That others will have the benefit of our love is a secondary consideration. The primary consideration is our own purification, and this should be our priority. First of all, we must establish within ourselves a mind of lovingness and clarity. The two go together, because the mind that is loving is a mind that has no turmoil in it. The mind without turmoil is a mind that thinks and speaks clearly.
When we establish the intention to purify ourselves, we can use this discourse to great advantage by checking up. What am I doing? Am I following my intentions? That is one way of making sure that we haven't strayed from the path. No need to blame oneself. It is quite possible to alter our thoughts. It's not that difficult. The more we meditate, the easier it is. We gain strength in our minds, which makes it possible to change our thoughts at will. The one who becomes master of his or her thoughts is the one who gains insight.